The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into my wrists at 1:47 a.m. as two police officers dragged me out of my own home. But what broke my heart wasn't the arrest. It was my family standing on the sidewalk, smiling. My sister was even live streaming it, eagerly telling over 1 million viewers that justice was finally being served for my crimes. They thought they had completely destroyed me, trading my life for an inheritance they never earned. Before we uncover why they were smiling, hit that subscribe button, follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my voice is reaching. They thought this was the end of me, but 15 minutes after we arrived at the precinct, the police chief walked into the interrogation room, his hands shaking as he read my file, and whispered 5 words that changed everything. My name is Maya, and I am 27 years old. I always believed that family was supposed to be your sanctuary, the one place where you were entirely safe from the cruelty of the outside world. But at exactly 1:47 a.m., that illusion was shattered forever when 2 police officers violently kicked in my front door, blinding me with flashlights and demanding I put my hands behind my back. They held a warrant, claiming I was under arrest for multi-million-dollar estate fraud. As the cold steel of the handcuffs snapped tightly around my wrists, I didn't yell or scream. I didn't resist. Instead, my eyes locked onto the sidewalk just outside my door. There stood my parents and my younger sister, Chloe. They weren't crying, and they weren't shocked. They were standing behind the officers with smug, triumphant smiles plastered across their faces. Chloe was holding up her phone, completely live streaming my humiliation to over 1 million viewers online, eagerly telling her audience that the family's greedy monster was finally getting what she deserved. The text on the warrant was a complete fabrication, exactly like the narrative they were spinning for social media. But I chose to remain perfectly silent. As they led me down the steps past my grinning relatives, I held my head high. My family thought this was the moment they finally broke me and stole my grandfather's legacy. They had no idea they had just walked into a trap. To understand how my own flesh and blood could stand on my porch and smile while I was being led away in chains, you have to understand the sheer depth of their greed. It all began with my grandfather, Arthur. He was a brilliant, self-made man who had built a sprawling real estate worth millions. Growing up, my parents and Chloe viewed him less like a grandfather and more like a walking bank account. They only visited when they needed a loan, a new luxury car, or a handout to fund their extravagant lifestyles. But 3 years ago, everything changed. Grandfather Arthur fell deeply ill. When the diagnosis came in, my family suddenly vanished. My parents claimed they were too busy with their social calendar, and Chloe was too wrapped up in building her online influencer career. They couldn't be bothered to deal with the messy, exhausting reality of hospital visits, medication schedules, and late-night emergencies. So, I stepped up. I moved into his house, quit my job, and became his full-time caretaker. For 3 long years, I held his hand through the darkest nights, ensuring he was comfortable, loved, and never alone. It was during those quiet moments that he realized who truly loved him and who was just waiting for him to die. When he passed away peacefully 4 months ago, his will revealed that he had left the vast majority of his estate to me. The moment the lawyers read the terms, the synthetic masks of grief slipped off my family's faces. They flew into a feral rage, openly accusing me of manipulating a dying man. That was the exact moment they decided to destroy me. The charges they fabricated against me were as elaborate as they were cruel. My parents and Chloe knew they couldn't contest the will legally because grandfather Arthur had been completely lucid when he signed it. So, they decided to play dirty. They hired a shady private attorney who helped them forge a series of financial documents, making it look like I had systematically transferred millions of dollars out of my grandfather's bank accounts while he was heavily medicated in the hospital. They framed it as a textbook case of grand larceny and estate fraud. But their plan required more than just forged papers. It required immense public pressure. Chloe weaponized her massive social media following, posting tearful, highly edited videos detailing how her evil sister had isolated their vulnerable grandfather and stolen their family's rightful heritage. The internet, fueled by her lies, quickly turned into an angry mob. They swarmed the local police department's social media pages, demanding my immediate arrest. Under the crushing weight of public scrutiny and the seemingly ironclad forged evidence my parents provided, the local authorities felt they had no choice but to fast-track a warrant for my arrest. As the squad car pulled away from my house, the flashing red and blue lights illuminated my parents pouring champagne on the lawn while Chloe kept her camera rolling. Sitting in the cramped plastic back seat, a profound, icy silence settled over me. The pain of their betrayal was sharp, but beneath it, a strange sense of calm began to take root. They thought they had backed me into a corner with their public smear campaign and forged documents. They had absolutely no idea that every single move they made was being watched. The heavy metal doors of the precinct slammed shut behind me, cutting off the distant sounds of the night. The officers led me into a sterile, brightly lit booking room that smelled strongly of old coffee and industrial cleaner. I was directed to a cold metal chair, my hands still tightly cuffed behind my back. Despite the late hour, the station was humming with low activity, but I refused to let them see me break. I sat perfectly straight, keeping my breathing steady, channeling the exact resilience my grandfather had always praised in me. A seasoned booking officer, a man with graying hair and a tired expression, sat down across from me at the computer terminal. He barely looked at me as he reached for my official case file to begin processing the charges. "Name and date of birth," he muttered routinely, his fingers hovering over the keyboard ready to type in the standard protocol for an estate fraud arrest. I gave him my information calmly. He clicked open the digital file containing the warrant and the supporting documents my family had submitted. Then, the entire room seemed to go completely still. The officer stopped typing mid-word. His eyes widened as they scanned the screen, and the color rapidly drained from his face. He stared at the monitor for several long seconds, then looked up at me, his gaze shifting from routine indifference to absolute shock. Without saying a single word to me, he abruptly pushed his chair back, stood up, and grabbed the physical file jacket. He stepped hurriedly out into the hallway, frantically waving over a colleague to whisper in hushed, panicked tones. The 15 minutes I spent alone in that interrogation room felt like an eternity. Every tick of the institutional clock on the wall echoed through the silence, building a heavy, suffocating tension. I kept my eyes fixed on the door, knowing that the frantic whispering in the hallway wasn't about my alleged crimes, but about the explosive reality hidden inside my legal file. My family's carefully constructed trap was about to spring shut, but not on the target they intended. Suddenly, the heavy door flew open with a sharp bang. The police chief himself stepped into the room, bypassing the arresting officers entirely. He wasn't carrying the arrogant posture of a man about to break a criminal. Instead, his face was pale, and the papers in his hand were visibly shaking. He pulled out the metal chair across from me and sat down, taking a deep, ragged breath before he finally spoke. "Ma'am, you are," he began, his voice trembling under the weight of the revelation. He didn't finish the sentence right away. He set the file down and looked at me with deep apology. "Ma'am, you are not the suspect here. You are the federal trustee of this entire jurisdiction's emergency development fund, and your grandfather was a retired federal judge." He explained that the file contained an unalterable, legally binding protective order issued directly by a federal estate attorney weeks before Arthur passed. My grandfather had known exactly what my parents were up to. He had secretly recorded them attempting to bribe his medical staff to declare him incompetent, and he had logged everything safely into this file. The chief leaned back, a grim smile replacing his shaken expression. He explained that by orchestrating this highly public arrest and broadcasting it via Chloe's live stream, my family hadn't exposed me. They had seamlessly walked right into a massive federal trap. My grandfather and his legal team had intentionally left the outdated, vulnerable version of the will accessible, knowing my parents' sheer desperation would drive them to commit an obvious crime to override it. They had taken the bait perfectly. The police department didn't just drop the fraudulent charges against me. They immediately shifted gears to execute the federal warrants already embedded in my protective file. While I was sitting in the interrogation room, a specialized team was being dispatched to round up my parents and sister. The charges leveled against them were staggering: grand larceny, systematic forgery of legal documents, extortion, elder financial abuse, and filing a false police report to authorities. I stood up as the chief personally unlocked my handcuffs, apologizing profusely for the dramatic theater of the night. I walked over to the large station window that looked out toward the processing area. Within minutes, the heavy double doors opened, and my parents and Chloe were marched in. Their smug, celebratory grins were entirely gone, replaced by looks of sheer terror as handcuffs were snapped onto their wrists under the bright fluorescent lights. The exact public humiliation they had meticulously designed to destroy my life had completely snapped shut on them. The aftermath was swift and uncompromising. Chloe's live stream, which she had intended to be the ultimate instrument of my public destruction, backfired spectacularly. Millions of viewers watched in real time as the narrative flipped, exposing my family as the true criminals. Within weeks, they faced full legal ruin, their assets seized to pay back the funds they had stolen, while public shame completely deconstructed their social standing. With the legal battle permanently settled, I sold the chaotic family estate and moved far away to a quiet, beautiful coastal town. Using grandfather Arthur's true inheritance, I built a peaceful life completely free from their toxic greed, honoring his memory by funding a local charity for elderly care. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Comment below. And meanwhile, check out the 2 stories on the screen.